Welcome to another episode of The Worthy Physician. I'm your host, Dr. Sapna Shahak, and today I have Furkhan Dandia, and he is a psychologist out of Canada, across the border. And I think that what he has to share today is actually a topic that is not discussed enough. So, Furkhan, will you please introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on, Sapna. My name's, as you mentioned, Furkhan Dandia. I'm a therapist here in Canada. I do have a bit of a background. I initially went to school to become an engineer, and then I worked in the oil and gas. Well, I still work in the oil and gas industry. I've been in it for 16 years. But yeah, the real shift to becoming a therapist or an advocate for men's mental health uh, was something I embarked on 5 years ago. I'd say the first half of that was truly navigating my own mental health journey. And then the last 2.5 years, I've been focusing on supporting others in this space. And that's where I went to get my master's in psychology in the middle of COVID. At that same time, I started my own podcast. And yeah, I'm kind of in all kinds of directions when it comes to this stuff. I'm super passionate about it. And I truly believe we need to have more dialogue, and not specifically men, in general. And I think men struggle more, as is evident from the suicide rates we see globally. So there's something there that, and I believe we've made good headway in terms of the conversations we're having now, but there's still a long ways to go to support everyone in the space.
So, can you tell me why we don't discuss men's mental health? Because men are also human beings and have the emotional gamut that uh, women do, maybe not in the exact same. But why is
hmm
it that we as human beings don't discuss men's mental health?
Yeah, I mean, what I can shed light on there is my own personal experience and why I struggled with it, and then perhaps share some of the things I hear in the work I do as well. But for me, it really was around this notion of shame and failure. And I think part of it was also that it's very common, you hear it now, but being emotional or expressing your emotions or expressing what you need, because that's what really it boils down to is if an individual is struggling with mental health, it's being able to have that level of vulnerability and ask for help. And that's often, for whatever reason, and I could share why, men consider that or associate that ask as weakness. It's like, if I'm asking for help, that means I can't take care of myself. I can't take care of my family. I can't take care of my spouse, my children, whatever it may be. It immediately translates to weakness, and that creates a barrier, right? And that was kind of where I struggled when I didn't know what was going on in my life. I was asking a lot of questions. I was struggling in my marriage. I just didn't know how to go ask for help, because I thought if I went and sought help, that meant I was weak. That meant I was accepting failure. I was saying, hey, I failed. Now I need help. And that also prevented me for a really long time to go seek out therapy, or just even look into therapy to begin with, because to me it was almost like, oh, you go there when you've basically failed and you're out of all options. And I was out of all options because I didn't know what to do. So that was kind of my own struggle. And then, you kind of go, I went through a divorce. So then similar with that too, was this notion of shame and not being, I guess, comfortable to express that, hey, I'm struggling with this big change in my life, and telling my friends or asking for help from them. Fortunately, I was able to really dive deep into therapy and seek the help I needed at the time. But again, that notion of shame was prevalent there. Fast forward now, in terms of the men's groups I facilitate, or even the guys I talk to, the theme is always the same. It's just not feeling comfortable asking for help. And sometimes it's hard if you've got a social circle of friends or men or family. You almost worry that, hey, if I'm going to express that I'm struggling with depression or anxiety, I'm going to get labeled, right? And sometimes uh, your friends and family do have really good intentions and they mean well, but they also don't have the tools or the skills to be able to check in on someone, right? So if I know a friend of mine is struggling and I don't have the right tools, I may almost check in on him in the wrong ways, like, hey, how's your mental health? Like, how's your depression? And that could sometimes trigger someone too, right? So there's that piece as well where men are very afraid to share that with people they know because they're worried of that label that may come with it. And maybe it's like if it's a situational type of disorder, you feel depressed under certain conditions, it's not permanent. You don't want that label to come with it. So what I find is helpful is a lot of the men's groups, they're powerful, and the reason why I facilitate them is because you see the impact it's having on the men. They're able to show up, they feel safe, they feel seen, they feel heard, and they can express whatever is on their chest, but then they can walk away from that room and not have to like worry about, oh, am I going to see this person at a social event or a family event, and will I have to talk about it or shy away from it, right? So it kind of, it's like a very, it's safe container. You kind of go, you express what you need, you get that sense of community from the other men, and then you're able to go home and feel better about yourself and see your family and your friends without having to worry about answering their questions.
So you've created a safe space for men that are struggling with depression or other issues to come and express themselves in a
Mm-hmm.
non-judgmental space. And that's huge because we all need that safe space in order to purge our feelings. Otherwise, that's a very heavy weight to carry.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think in do you think that some of this is the way that men have been groomed through society, or through society's lens, that you're just supposed to just toughen your way through it and just put your boots on, and you're not a man if you can't get through it without help? Do you think that's part of it, or do you think it's we've conditioned ourselves, or
Yeah, I
as
think I
humans?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's a combination of both. Like it's conditioning ourselves, but then also the messaging we receive as children. Growing up, I didn't really see my father encouraging me to speak my emotions because that's not something he knew or had the skill. Even though I would see him being emotional at times, there was no expression of it or embracing it. So I think it's a bit of both. It's society and the conditioning. But you think about it, like a few hundred years ago or 1,000 years ago, men would sit together around a fire and share stories, right? So it was there. A lot of men would go hunting together, so there was that camaraderie there or sense of community. And in I don't know, maybe it was the industrial revolution, but like we've basically shifted away from that. And you look at us, I look at myself too sometimes. And part of the reason why I wanted to go through this career transition or pivot in life is most of the time we're sitting in our offices just secluded from each other. And whether you're in an office or even a cubicle with walls, you're just locked in with your computer. You're not necessarily communicating with each other. You're not socializing in that sense, sharing a lot of the things that are going on in your life. When you're at work, it's just work. And if you're spending 8 to 10 hours there, where are you getting that time to sit with your brothers and have that sense of community? That's why I think these men's groups are so powerful. And we have some locally, but I've come across groups online through my community on social media, various groups, pretty much every city I can think of, there's something going on. So those are really, really powerful for that reason alone, because it's tapping into something our ancestors were doing. So, I mean, to answer your question in a nutshell, yes, I do believe there is that conditioning and a pressure from society. But if you think about it, until recently, men were counted on supporting the family and providing for the family. And there was a lot of pressure there too. So they didn't really have or at least men would feel like they didn't have the chance or at least the luxury to worry about their emotions or talk about them because they have to keep their head down and provide for their family. So yeah, there's definitely that pressure that comes with it, but things are starting to change as we've talked about previously. But at the same time, you have to look at how were men living their lives in the past, right? How are our ancestors doing it? And again, there was a huge sense of community. Like if the man wasn't counted on to provide solely, right? You had a whole community there taking care of each other. Even for the women, you had everyone supporting, pulling their weight to take care of the kids and provide that nurture and community. So we've definitely stepped away from that, and hopefully we can get back to it.
I would have to agree. We've fallen away from the statement that it takes a village to raise a family is
Yeah.
absolutely correct.
Yeah.
And it's not just the kids, it's the other members of the family because
Yep.
they had that backup. And we're seeing a lot of what we are thinking now is the ideal family is, oh look, it's we've done it all on our own. And while that's great, it's absolutely exhausting, it's draining, and I don't think it's really sustainable.
Mm-mm.
And
Yeah.
for reasons that you've mentioned as well.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. How how do you encourage the men in the groups that you lead? How do you encourage them to change that narrative for themselves? I mean, obviously they've taken the first step by coming to the group, but
Mm-hmm.
we can't change society overnight. But what do you say to the listener that might be struggling? Um, what do you tell to those gentlemen?
Yeah, I mean, there's the guys that are coming to the group. I think we can't undermine how big of a step that is because what I've noticed in my experience with our groups is even though they're showing up for the first time, they may not speak a lot, they may not share a lot because it is scary at first that hey, how like can I trust these guys, right? Am I going to be judged? So a lot of the guys that show up for the first time, they'll tend to be quiet, but then they'll see the depth of the conversation that's happening, how there's no judgment, how people are just throwing some very serious, heavy stuff on the table, but stuff that we all struggle with. We all have our own version of it in our lives. It's not like we're all kind of isolated from it. There are struggles. If you've got kids, if you're married, if you've got family, if your parents are getting older, if you've got concerns at job, your work, you're not getting along with your boss. We all go through that in different shapes and forms. So we all need to have that sense of support and community around it. So these guys, after maybe one or two sessions, they start feeling comfortable. They start putting stuff on the table. So that is definitely powerful. So having a group like that, I can make a huge difference because guess what? What happens in those cases is these men are then able to go home and role model that behavior for their children. They're role modeling it for their family members, for their friends. They're sharing this when they go home because they see how powerful it is that they're able to share with their friends and family that, hey, I'm doing this because it's making me a better father, a better parent, a better husband, a better son, whatever it may be, whatever your role is in life, it improves in all facets. And I've noticed that for myself too, the improvement in relationships alone. So that's one side of it. The other side is a lot of my friends tell me that, especially if they're in different cities, that they don't have their own groups that they can go to and find support. What I encourage them to do is, I didn't have a group either. I spoke to a friend who had met recently. We're friends now, but at the time he was an acquaintance. And I said, hey, I want to do this in the community, but I can't do it alone. And I think you'd be a good fit and we could do this together. And he signed up and we both started this, and then it just grew organically, right? So what I tell other men is if they don't have a group, start your own. And you may have two or three people first, but through word of mouth, it may grow. And even if it doesn't, at least you've now created this container for yourself with other men where you're having these conversations and feeling that sense of support. And I think part of the struggle, and this is kind of coming from my previous point around the way we've shaped our culture and society is it's very individualistic now. And so when we struggle, we almost struggle in isolation. But when we find that sense of community and support, that struggle doesn't feel as hard because now you realize that you're not alone in it. And then you've also got some support where you can just go talk about your feelings and express yourself. That's all it takes sometimes. You're not looking for a solution. Like even in our groups, we're not solving the person's problem. We're just listening and we're sharing our own experiences. We're asking questions. Well, that person isn't leaving the room with a full fleshed out solution. The problem is still there, but at least that person feels like, okay, I feel lighter. I'm not alone. I heard different perspectives. I heard different experiences. Now I can go home and think about it and do something. And I don't have to now carry this burden around, and it may come out in different ways on my wife, my parents, my children. None of that happens because they've taken that load off.
It's a very rich experience, though, because
Mm-hmm.
when you unload your emotions or whatever is frustrating you, several things I find come to light. And that is not only do you feel lighter, like you said, but you're going to be less irritable. It is possible that you're going to potentially be able to do some reflection, like you said, go home and think about it. But a lot of times that's where solutions come out from as well, because in therapy, they don't always necessarily have you don't necessarily draft a solution. A lot of times the
Right.
solution comes from the inner reflection.
Correct. Yeah, there's a huge, and I just want to highlight that in our groups, we're not doing any therapeutic work. We're not offering any therapy, even though like everyone in the room knows I'm a therapist. I keep that very separate because I don't want to create this environment that maybe, oh, am I getting therapy or what? No, it's just completely void of that. But what I will say is, as a therapist, I do see the power of talk therapy, as you mentioned there. So there is something powerful of just talking through it and just knowing that you're being heard, because that's 90% of the problem is people don't have that outlet or the opportunity to talk through it, right? So that's the one thing I'll mention, the impact of just being able to talk through it.
Now, could you speak to the suicide rates among men? Because you said something very powerful earlier, and that was that men have a hard time emotionally and look at the suicide rates, which
Mhm.
is, I never want to see somebody take their own life. They have to be in a very dark, dark place. And I
Mhm.
have a lot of sympathy for that. But could you speak to that? Because it's it's a focus of mine, and as this podcast focuses on physician burnout.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, to your point, yeah, it is a dark place. And I think some of the stats I've come across, I don't know if it's consistent everywhere, but typically what it works out to is 1 in 4 men is committing suicide, right? That's kind of that we're talking about 25%. So that's pretty significant. So, and it really comes down to what we've talked about here, where there's a sense of isolation, the feeling of shame, guilt. There's so much that starts piling up where, and again, I don't know what's going through the individual's mind. And as we said, obviously a lot of people are in that dark place where they just can't see a way out. They don't know how to get out, or even, and they don't feel like they can ask for help. So that's the only outlet or pathway they can see. Now, like I said, I'm sure everyone's experience is different and the challenge is different and what's going through their head. Some of the concerns are different. So it's hard to be able to pinpoint one thing, but it's really that it's for them at that point, taking their life is the solution. And to your point, it is like it's hard to digest, like how can someone get to that point? But how can we as a society do a better job where the person doesn't feel that, right? Where they feel that no, there is still a solution, there is another option, there is another way. but how can we support each other through those times, right? Because I have been in those places too where, I felt completely alone, and I was like, okay, this is like, I don't see a way out. But it was being able to at least wait another day. It's like give it one more day every day, and hopefully I'll see the light at the end of the tunnel here. But I can appreciate where people get there, right? Where you feel like everything's been taken away, and this is the easiest way out right now. So I think it's important to have more of these conversations, do our best to support others. Again, one of the things is we don't know what someone's going through, right? There's been so many stories I've heard of, I don't know anyone directly who's committed suicide, but I've heard stories where people are just shocked. They're like, hey, I saw him just a couple of days ago and he was fine. So what's going on, right? Like, how can that happen? So clearly there's so much going on behind the scenes that we're not aware of. And we often don't take that into consideration. Someone says something to upset us or does something, we're just immediately will jump to conclusions, or we'll start judging them, or just be upset with them. But it's like, we don't know what the person's going through. So and this is kind of one of the things I really focus on in my work and my podcast, is my hope to encourage people to just show each other love and have this sense of unity, that we're all in this together. As hard as it can get sometimes, because you're not going to see eye to eye with everyone, but it's just remembering that at our core, we're all humans and we're all connected in some way. How can we just remind ourselves that in those hard moments when we're getting upset with each other? So yeah.
I would have to agree. We don't know what people are going through, and that's the reason why compassion and just mutual respect, dignity, it's free. It's free, and it's actually it's energy efficient.
Right.
It's energy efficient. And one of the things that I've kind of experienced is that I think, and I've read some narratives. I haven't come across any hardcore research, but when somebody has made the decision to take their life, it's almost as if a curtain has lifted. It's almost as
Mm.
if there's a sense of relief. And so many
Mm-hmm.
times they were happy. What are you talking about? I saw them smiling.
Mm-hmm.
This was a narrative that my colleague, that my friend that died by suicide, from suicide, but that was the narrative. Is everybody's narrative is different.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing I would tell the listener is your mental health matters. Definitely, if you can, find a group, start a group, consider actual therapy, because in the end, we are the drivers of that bus. We can choose how we want to help ourselves. And I shrug society's expectations, because if those expectations are holding us in an area, or potentially holding us in an area that's not good for us, those are not good expectations, and let them go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just to build on that, one of the things, like, I focus a lot on self-love, and I've kind of built a bit of a framework around it. And one of the things that I tell people, or at least work through, is expectations, and understanding where are those coming from, who were they set by, and what happens when those expectations aren't met. Like, what are you telling yourself? And sometimes just going through that exercise of self-reflection can do wonders, because you just realize the pressure you're putting yourself on for something that perhaps someone said to you when you were like maybe a child, right? Maybe 7 or 8 years old, someone told you and it stuck with you, and you just carried that expectation your whole life. So just simple things like that, bringing to awareness where we're putting pressure on ourselves, where it's coming from. A lot of the times the voice is in our head is not even ours, and it can be so crippling for many people, myself included. I still struggle with it, is these high expectations of myself, and when I fall short, the internal dialogue I have with myself is brutal. And that's where, again, we need, to your point, to have that compassion for each other, because we're all trying to do our best. And sometimes we are going to fall short. Sometimes we're going to miss the mark completely. But how can we as a society, again, it comes back to the same thing over and over, have this sense of community and support for each other, knowing that everyone's fighting their own battle in some shape or form. Things are tough, right? Especially, and they seem to be getting tougher. So how can we help each other through this and recognize that we're all struggling in some way?
Thank you for that. And can you please tell us a little bit more about your podcast?
Yeah, well, you've been on there. I haven't released the episode, but it'll be coming out soon. So yeah, my podcast really started with the whole notion of making these conversations easier to digest. What I'll kind of give a backstory. So when I was going through my divorce, I started talking to a lot of men in my community about these things and having very similar conversations around, okay, why is this struggle? Why is this so hard? Why can't we just be open and honest about our feelings? And I would often have these conversations one-on-one with my friends, and I realized that, oh, other people can listen to this and benefit from it. So that's where the idea for the podcast really came out from. And I've covered a lot of various conversations of people struggling with their mental health or going through some very tough situations in life, and how they were able to navigate it, with the hopes that the listener can realize that they're not alone, that there was someone, maybe part or a small fraction of their story resonates for the listener, and they can get hope, or they can find some tools or draw some insight or wisdom from someone else's story. And that's really why these groups are powerful too, because it's a shared experience. And I'll go back to the whole sitting around a fire. That was part of it too. I think you're sitting around there, you're sharing these experiences and you're learning from each other. And that's what we've lost. So that was really the goal of the podcast, which has kind of evolved now into more societal issues that we're seeing, because that's, as we've talked about, sometimes the root of the problem. So how can you uncover some of these underlying issues? So the podcast itself is called Easy Conversations, with the hope that these are easy conversations that we've just shied away from and avoided for a really, really long time.
I appreciate that. And these will be in the show notes because we do have to have those conversations. By having those tough conversations and making them easier, that's the only way we're going to make them easier and more mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
The nice thing about it is that you're touching on subjects that not everybody does. Let's get past the small talk about how's the weather, except for when you're having forest fires. But
Yeah.
let's get past the small talk and let's get down to what really matters. Let's get that camaraderie going, because right, that is what connects us as a society, even across country continental boundaries.
Yeah.
We're storytellers. We're storytellers by nature, and that's how we connect.
And it's crazy, right? Like I mean, part of it is maybe it's just a calling, but when I go to even social events, there's a lot of people I meet in my daily life, and often I have nothing in common with the other individual, but I'll just show interest in hearing about their life. And it's amazing. You see people's face light up because they're not used to someone asking about something, fascinating about their life. To your point, it's very surface level, small talk, superficial. Where's your house? What are you doing for the summer? Where are you vacationing? Very superficial, and often people don't get to the depths. And when you try to go there, you just ask someone about, hey, tell me your story. And like I said, their faces light up. They're just so excited. They could talk and talk and talk. And there's something powerful there. And it really goes back to your point. We are storytellers. Everyone has a story. There's something fascinating because we all come from different walks of life. We've all been through something. We've all had to deal with our own version of adversity. And that's how you build community, is through showing interest in each other, not by trying to find how you can benefit from the interaction, or how can I find something of materialistic value in common? It's no, how can I find what I try to do? And this is something, again, that's come to me in the last few years, is finding something in common with the individual at a deep core level, right? Do I share a value with this person? And quite often we do, whether it's around family, around different aspects of life in terms of your purpose and stuff like that. Like what we're in terms of how do you want to shape the world? There's always something there you can find in common with someone at a deeper level, and that could unite you. So that's my hope, that more people do that and focus on that, because the rest of the stuff is not going to last.
But finding those core values, to circle back, that's a big part, I would assume, of these men's groups, is not just where men come in and talk about our feelings or talk about what's troubling us, but the fact that more than likely they are going to, by sharing their stories, they're going to make those connections, which is an even stronger bond.
Well, and that's it, right? The biggest thing, it's crazy. Anytime I reflect on the men's group we run here, it's, if you were to look at us, we have nothing in common. There's different skin colors, there's different hair colors, different people growing up in different parts of the world, having different experiences, different educational backgrounds, different familial backgrounds, different current life situations. There's not a whole lot in common, but what unites us is our emotions, our feelings, our desire to be better men, our desire to do good things. Those are the things that unite us. Our struggles are very common. Like, struggles don't look at any of those other things I mentioned, physical features or any of that. It's common. So that's what really brings us together. And there's no way I would have made friends or spent time like that, or intimate time in a room with those men, because I would have never crossed paths with them, just based on my life experiences and where I'm at. So it's so powerful where you can get people like that in a room and have that sense of community and brotherhood in our case.
I love that because it's painting a different narrative than what society paints. And so I'm all about creating your own niche and taking care of yourself. And you've definitely done that. And you're providing a framework for others to do so.
Hmm.
So if the listener wanted to reach out, where could they find you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much on all the social media platforms, unfortunately or fortunately, but my primary one is Instagram. So I go by the handle of Unoia Zen. So it's at EUNOIAZEN. Um, and if anyone's interested, Unoia means a beautiful mind. It's a Greek word. So my hope is we can all get to that state of having a beautiful mind and uh, giving ourselves the love we all are craving and trying to seek it out in other forms.
And what is one last pearl of wisdom you would leave our listeners?
The simplest thing I could say is you're not alone. And I'll just build on that. I think, as I've talked about all along here, when we're struggling, and I fall into this trap too quite often, is when something's going on and you just feel like you're so alone. But even if that situation specific to you is very unique, someone somewhere is struggling with something similar. So just by having conversations and opening up, it could do wonders. And I've seen the power of it. And like I said, I'll go, like I said, I'll go to social gatherings and I'll be talking about some deep, deep stuff with people who just have had this need to let it out for so long, but they just haven't found that outlet. And just giving them that space can do wonders. So we're not alone. Everyone's got something going on, and everyone is just looking for an opportunity to open up and share. So how can you be that vessel, or how can you just put it out there and someone will be there to listen? You just need to trust. And if the other person that you share with isn't in that space to hear you, that's on them. That's something they're dealing with. that has nothing to do with you. So that's the other thing I remind people, that don't let someone else's reaction discourage you, as hard as it can be. Just remind yourself that everyone's going through something. It's nothing personal.
Thank you for that, because that's actually a very important perspective.
Mhm.
So for Khan, thank you so much, and all this will be in the show notes. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you again for having me on. I really appreciate the work you're doing, and the stuff you're talking about is so important. And often it's through personal experience that we can take that experience and do something with it, and make a change. So I appreciate the work you're doing in this space as well.
Thank you.